So yes, welcome and thanks for spending the next hour with us as we look at the hiring that's taking place in Alberta's energy services sector. My name is Pat Huffnail-Smith, and we've been doing these sessions on the talent needs for the evolving energy ecosystem for a couple of years now, certainly as we saw things change so significantly within Alberta's oil and gas sector. And I would like to let you know that the project that we've been working on and all the information that we're sharing is a result of a project funded by the Alberta government. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm presenting this webinar from Treaty 7 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Blackfoot Confederation, including the Kainai, Piikani, and Siksika, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda First Nation. So I think, some of you who have perhaps been involved in the or have participated in some of our webinars in the past may have acknowledged or seen a bit of a shift in terms of the kind of information we're presenting. Early on when we started doing these workshops in, say, 2019, 2020, we were really talking about the opportunities to leverage experience gained in the oil and gas industry into other sectors. And so while we certainly still have that theme, what we're also seeing is that the oil and gas sector itself is starting to hire again. And there's a lot of different things that are driving that in terms of, where the commodity prices are, sort of a realization that, yes, we do need oil and gas for a period of time. And so this particular webinar does focus on the hiring and, in fact, the labor shortages and the immediate need for workers in Alberta's energy services sector. So really the focus for today is to talk more about what is the energy services sector, the kinds of employment opportunities that are available, and why this might be a good time to consider a career in the sector. We also acknowledge in looking at what the kinds of jobs, the location of the jobs and the work arrangements associated with the energy sector, that there may be more significant transition required in order to take advantage of some of those career opportunities. And so that's why we also have Liliana Gonzalez with us, because she's going to offer some thoughts in terms of how do you build mental wellness as you contemplate a career change, and one that might require more career transition than other kinds of opportunities that might be out there. So just a few just want to spend a couple minutes on just some webinar protocols, and this is sort of old hat anymore because most of us have spent a lot of time in webinars in the last couple of years, but just want to reinforce that the meeting is being recorded, and we will circulate the recording and the slides to anybody who registered for this webinar. We are going to be doing some polls throughout the webinar. And it really is just an opportunity for us to gather information about who our audience is, because that will help us sort of focus our time because we have such a short period of time. But it also will tell us about what we might need to contemplate or think about in terms of future webinars. I'm going to ask that you remain on mute for the duration of the webinar. And if you have any questions, to please put them in chat. And we're hoping to have some time at the end of the webinar to answer some of your questions, but we also are very committed to sticking to our hour. So any questions that we don't get to, we'll cover off in our frequently asked questions section in our newsletter, which you'll all receive as a registrant to this webinar. So on that note, and to just, if you do wish to, if you do prefer to ask a question anonymously, don't hesitate to send your questions directly to myself, Liliana, or Andrea Newell. And then that way we'll get those by direct message and can address them anonymously as well. So on that note, I want to start with our first poll. And this will just, as I said, give us a little bit of a understanding of how I might focus the upcoming few minutes as we cover off this topic. So there's 2 questions here, and you can go from answering one to the next without us having to relaunch the poll. So please just take a couple of minutes, and let us know how you would rate your understanding of Alberta's energy services sector and its careers, and then also what you might think are some potential barriers for you in terms of considering a career within this sector. And if you're a career counselor or an employment practitioner, for the second question, I just ask you to kind of put your client's hat on and, let us know, kind of based on your client's needs and how your clients might be thinking, what you think potential barriers might be for talent looking to move into or considering the energy services sector. Okay. All right. Maybe about 15 seconds, and then I'll get Andrea to close things off, and we'll take a look at your answers. Okay. All right, so little more than 50% feel like you know quite a bit or have a really solid understanding of the energy services sector. And so, that's good. I maybe won't spend I'll spend enough time so that those that only know a little bit or have no understanding of the sector to kind of provide some context before we go into talking about job specifics. But, that's really helpful. And I hope that those of you that have a pretty good understanding are patient as we go through things. And also, if there's any reactions to anything I'm saying or anything like that, I certainly invite you to put that in chat because it'll just add to the robustness of the conversation. And so what are the potential barriers? Lack of awareness, that tends to be, true for most. Anytime you're looking at a new job or a new sector, if you don't understand the careers, that's can be a significant barrier. Oh, how come I'm doing that? Okay, uncertain about the future. Okay, well, hopefully we can address or speak to some of those uncertainties or unknowings that might be potential barriers for yourself or potentially your clients for pursuing a career in this sector. So as I said, just in terms of providing some, a fairly high level context or definition for who the energy services sector is. And basically, the energy services sector plays a role across the oil and gas industry life cycle. And so there's some specific activities and occupations that are associated with each phase of the oil and gas life cycle. And those are this yellow box across the top. But there's also a number of services, areas of expertise that span across all phases of the oil and gas life cycle. And so, those include things like environmental health and safety, data acquisition and analysis, workforce lodgings, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, manufacturing, rental and supply, but also inspection and monitoring. Those are activities that happen throughout the life of a well or field production. It's a very diverse mix of companies offering a broad range of products and services. That's kind of obvious from this graphic. But I think the other thing that's really important to understand is the energy services sector is contractors or are contractors to the exploration and production companies, including oil sands and also pipeline companies. So when in terms of what drives activity within the energy services sector, it really is dependent on the E&P companies, the oil sands companies, and the pipeline companies investing in activity. So those companies can generate revenue from their oil and gas production or from their pipeline assets. The energy services sector doesn't necessarily have that same kind of revenue stream. And so it does speak to sort of why we see some of the some of the bigger peaks and valleys with some of the energy services employment, because they really do rely on the spending by the other sectors in the industry. But we also see that they tend to be the first to come back after a downturn. And that's certainly what we're seeing now as, the price of commodities are up and companies are looking at maintaining and investing in production. That has an impact on the activity levels of the energy services sector. And we're certainly seeing that, and it's driving a lot of activity and hiring currently. So just as there's a broad range of services and products offered by the energy services companies, there's also a real broad range of companies that are involved in this sector. We have those large multinational companies, and I have listed some of those there that work, across international jurisdictions. Canada has a very solid group of Canadian companies that are within the energy services sector with lots of expertise and knowledge and history. And so I've listed some of the Canadian companies here. Now, these Canadian companies also expand and work in mostly the US, but they're based here in Canada for the most part. And the energy services sector also has a lot of small and medium enterprises. And so they might be kind of small, but they're certainly mighty, and they are growing and expanding. They maybe tend to be more sort of specialized in terms of some of the services that they provide, but they have a real strong and important foothold within Canada's energy services sector. What I've also listed here are the three industry associations that are most that represent the companies as members in the energy services sector. So CAOEC, CAGC, and PSAC, they look after different types of services that are provided by the energy services sector. And here I've included links to their member directory or their membership profiles to kind of give you a better sense of the broad range of companies that are there within this sector. But the websites themselves really are pretty rich in terms of just offering information on the kinds of activities that their members are involved in, sort of the state of the sector in general. Both PSAC and CAODC do quarterly drilling forecasts. So that gives some insights in terms of activity levels that might be in intel that you want to follow as you kind of pursue and look at what's going on in this sector. So just as the broad range of services, broad range of companies also leads to a broad range of employment opportunities within this sector. And so the next few slides, I'm going to talk about what are those occupations and what are some of those preferred qualifications. What are employers looking for as they look to fill these occupations? And so I'm not going to go in detail, you're going to get these slides with all the detail, but I want to share some sort of high-level observations around the kinds of hiring that the energy services sector does. First and foremost, the energy services workforce needs to be mobile. A lot of the work that's done is done in the field. And so as you'll see, a driver's license is a pretty core requirement. And so class 5 tends to be the bare minimum. And a lot of occupations are looking for that class 1 or class 3 driver's license because you're not only operating field equipment or equipment in the field, you're also driving that equipment to the site in order to participate in, some of the, site construction or completions work, that kind of stuff. And so that driver's license is very important. And what we're seeing is, as I said, bottom line, class 5 driver's license is key for these field roles because there's such a shortage of class 1 and class 3 driver's licenses across Canada. We're seeing companies starting to support the training of class 5 drivers within their company in order to move into some of those operator roles. So for the right person, they'll accept a class 5 driver's license and train them to be a class 1 or class 3 driver. So what's the right person? Well, there's a few things that are also prerequisites for working in the field in the energy services sector. One is safety is certainly a way of life within this sector. And so there is a desire for people to be safety aware. And some of that is related to having some safety certifications that indicate that you've done some training and are aware of some of the safety specific areas to pay attention to in the oil and gas industry. And I'll share some more information about that too. So that's a qualification for some companies. Other companies may train for those safety tickets after somebody's been hired. You just have to look at job postings to tell one way or another. The other thing that is critical to setting that foundation and ensuring a safe work environment is the pre-employment tests. And those typically are physical, drug, and alcohol testing. And they are a prerequisite to being hired into this sector. So these are jobs, actually everything I'm going to share over the next couple of slides are jobs that the energy services sector is hiring for currently. And it's based on an analysis of just job postings that are out there, but also researching and talking to energy services companies. So this is sort of another set of occupations that the energy services sector is hiring for: truck drivers, transport operators. Not necessarily that surprising, given that because this is all field work, you have to get materials and supplies, from the supplier into the field, and in some cases bringing product back from the field. And so a lot of need for truck drivers and transport operators. I'm going to skip down here to trades and technicians. These are both, certainly require more post-secondary training as either a trade certification or registered as an apprentice, or a shorter term technician diploma. And a lot of these jobs are either in the shop doing some work, especially around the heavy equipment as it comes in out of the field. But this also is a role that goes out to the field in order to ensure that equipment is well maintained, or repairs are made, and that kind of stuff. So again, these kinds of roles, trades and technicians, also need that Class 5 driver's license in order to be able to be mobile and go out to the field. Maybe lesser known about this sector is the amount of manufacturing that's included within the energy services sector. And this is really focused on fabricating and manufacturing the equipment, components, modules, piping systems that are used within the oil and gas industry. And so there are a lot of opportunities associated with the manufacturing subsector of the energy services sector, and a wide variety of opportunities, anything from assembly technicians, which really require, just a lot of manual dexterity and, ability to pay attention to detail, to trades positions in terms of, CNC operators often are millwrights, or not millwrights, sorry, machinists, to maintenance technicians, electrical, mechanical, millwrights, those that are actually maintaining the manufacturing facility itself. There also are a number of roles that are called field service technicians. So these are people that tend to be quite mechanically inclined, understand, how equipment and components work. And so they actually are involved in working in the field to help install, repair, maintain the equipment that's been manufactured. And so in some cases, those might be trades workers. In other cases, they may just be experienced workers that have a really good understanding of how equipment works. And of course, again, those will be people that require a driver's license in order to make their way out to the field to offer that kind of service. Lots of environmental roles associated with the energy services sector. A lot of this has been driven by, the focus on well decommissioning, reclamation, really dealing with some of the orphan well situation. And so while a lot of that funding, has been government programming, and was kind of a catalyst for a lot of the hiring that we see for these occupations, we see that as being ongoing. there is a greater awareness around the kinds of environmental issues that the industry needs to address. And so while that government funding was the catalyst for hiring in these amongst these occupations, those are continuing to grow. And again, there's a wide variety of occupations associated with, the environmental services offered through this sector. Anything from an engineer to a scientist with a biology, chemistry, environmental background, to environmental services or a biological chemistry engineering technologist that again is just really working on that environmental side of the industry. Again, it's some of it's head office jobs, but certainly with travel to the field, some are field-based roles. And so again, you see that driver's license required. Health and safety is another area that is currently hiring, because every work site associated with the energy services or field work requires health and safety personnel to be on site, and a broad range of qualifications required there, anything from an EMR, which is sort of a shorter term course, right through to a paramedic. And so that certainly is offering opportunities in this sector. And then finally, finally on this slide, I wanted to list some of the head office positions that we see being hired by the energy services sector. And in part, I put this here just because, lots of times these kind of head office positions, the accounting, the engineering, the IT, high tech roles are often sort of overlooked by job seekers, the thought being that it's mostly the E&P or oil sands companies that hire for these kind of roles, when in fact the energy services sector needs all these roles as well. And so just in your job search or in coaching people in their job search, not to overlook, some of those companies that I presented earlier as needing to fill these positions. And then finally, just another sort of group of occupations that are hired by energy services companies are what's called contracted services. So these are some roles that you might typically find in, the E&P, oil sands, or pipeline companies, that actually they are going to the energy services companies and contracting these positions to come work in their facilities. So anything from plant operators to maintenance technicians to field operators. And I've just listed some examples of companies that offer these contracted services to E&P, oil sands, and pipeline companies. So again, if some of these roles, more field or plant operations are roles that you have experience in, one of the options is to look at some of these contracting companies and the kinds of opportunities that they have available. Finally, I did mention that there's a lot of safety certificates that are associated with the oil and gas industry in particular, and certainly for the roles that are hired by the energy services sector. So here's kind of a list of the typical safety certifications. Not every position needs all of these. Job postings are pretty good at about sort of listing which ones are expected for certain roles. And as I said, some companies will look for candidates that bring this certification to the role. Other companies are willing to train for and help somebody get certified across the kinds of certifications that are required. And of course, Energy Safety Canada is industry's recognized service provider for safety certificates, but there's also different ways in which or different organizations that offer some of this training as well. I just caution you that when you pursue your own safety certifications, make sure that it is one that the industry is going to recognize. And my son had this experience where I think he did one of the courses, and I don't even remember which one it was, online, and then ended up on site where the company, the operator company, didn't accept the online certification. So just pay attention to that if you're going to invest your time and money into the safety certifications. Another key consideration, of course, in terms of the kinds of pursuing a career within the energy services sector is where is the work and what can be expected in terms of the work environment. And so again, I'm not going to go through these in detail, but this just really does reinforce, and again, this is by looking at job postings and where is the hiring happening, as well as talking to companies, where are the jobs? And again, this really reflects that the majority of the work associated with the energy services sector is are field-based. And so a lot of the occupations or the jobs are also based in more rural areas around where the activity is. And so there are some realities related to working in this sector. Relocation may be required, or in some cases likely required in order to meet the requirements of the company. But there also are rotational assignments. And so looking at whether or not that is a possibility for you in terms of, basically you can live where you want and work on rotation by getting to the location where the work is going to be based out of. And so, there's a whole variety of different rotational assignments that are available. And for the most part, workers are stay in company provided accommodations. So whether that be, workforce lodging accommodations or hotels, but that's provided by the company. Again, this just is a continuation of information about the work environment. And so it really is, I would say, in terms of considering whether or not a rotational assignment is right for you. It does take some assessing and sort of going into sort of the pursuing a career within the sector, eyes wide open in terms of what that means, assessing how might a rotational assignment impact you, how will it work for you and your family or significant others, what kinds of systems or supports would need to be in place if you were to be away from home for long periods of time. And I've worked with people that have done sort of rotational assignments very successfully, making the most of their time away at home. It's just an added sort of level of assessment and planning that you would need to do in order to be successful in an energy services career. So not going to sort of make any excuses for, some of the companies that have, been caught in the cyclicality and the seasonality of the employment associated with energy services careers. But I will say that truly seeing some employers doing things differently in order to attract and retain workers. They are in a tough spot. We know that there are energy services companies that are not able to work to their full capacity because they can't find enough talent. And so what kinds of things are happening differently? Well, we're certainly seeing employers participating in virtual hiring, in-person hiring, and online job fairs. And virtual hiring is really interesting in that on some job postings, there's an opportunity to make an appointment or schedule an appointment to talk to a recruiter right from the job posting. So obviously, you need to be very serious about pursuing that role. But if you feel like you have everything that's required and you're interested in working in this sector, some employers are offering that opportunity right from the job posting. We're seeing way more transparency around the compensation, the kind of benefits and the work arrangements that are available in the sector. And there's a variety of sort of contract options available, full-time, part-time, permanent term contracts. Industry is understanding that if they aren't more flexible in terms of the kinds of work arrangements they're offering, it's limiting who they're able to attract to the sector. A lot more employers indicating that they're willing to hire inexperienced workers and train. Again, looking for those foundational, are you physically fit? Are you, can you pass the drug and alcohol testing? Are you mechanically inclined? Are you okay working outdoors? And offering them apprenticeships and operator and training roles. So you don't have to come into these roles as an experienced worker. Some companies are offering relocation support, and there's a lot more companies that are partnering with employment and training organization that is delivering qualified and trained talent to the pool of labor that is interested in working in this sector. And so these are some of the organizations that, if you're interested in the energy services sector, you can connect with, and perhaps there is a training program that you can engage in as well. That doesn't just give you the certifications, but gives you a more rounded sense of what's it like and prepares you for working in the sector. So why consider an energy services career? Bottom line, there's still well-paid jobs that are to be had, and they can be and you can qualify for these well-paid jobs with very short-term training or no training, just coming in with the right mindset and aware of the kind of work that you're getting into. You don't necessarily, it's not necessarily a degree or a diploma that you need in order to get your foot in the door for these kinds of jobs. There is a variety of work arrangements and contract options that are available to you. So, it might be better fit for purpose as you make a transition into the sector or away from, a previous career. There's a lot of foot in the door opportunities with progression. This sector is really built on gaining on-the-job experience and being able to move up through the company. Whether you're considering something in the drilling, on a drilling crew, a service crew, as a field operator, companies have that progression built into those positions. And so it's a real opportunity to come in in an entry-level role and see how you may develop into a lead or a supervisory kind of position. And then finally, the other piece is that a lot of the skills and knowledge that is offered through the energy services sector are going to be transferable across the evolving energy system. And, you know, prior to 2014, we couldn't say this. You know, the energy services sector, you know, prior to the downturn, even prior to COVID, the oil and gas industry really was its single customer, if you want to put it that way. And what we're really seeing now is as our energy industry and energy systems evolve, the skills and knowledge and equipment and technology and expertise within the energy services sector is really going to be required more broadly. Certainly, we're going to see continued demand for oil and gas. You know, part of it is some of the shifting supply-demand dynamics that we see happening today because of the geopolitical factors. But also, as you look at where is some of the transition happening, new energy sources, the traditional oil and gas industry, and particularly natural gas is a feedstock for LNG, for hydrogen, and also helping to transition away from coal-powered generation. So natural gas in particular certainly is part of the energy transition in and of itself. Data acquisition, integration, and analysis, you know, widespread across the industry. And as we look at emerging energy sources and the application of clean tech and carbon tech, again, a lot of the energy services technology, expertise, and skills is also applicable to renewable energy, carbon capture, usage, and storage, hydrogen, helium and lithium extraction. All of those things rely on, you know, drilling wells, completing wells, measurement, monitoring, verification, data acquisition. So a lot more application than just utilizing these skills and technologies in the oil and gas industry. And then finally, you know, the manufacturing that's occurred for the oil and gas sector is again going to be leveraged for a lot of emerging technologies, whether that be CCUS, hydrogen, lithium extraction, those sort of low volume equipment and components. So they don't necessarily manufacture a whole bunch, but it's high value manufacturing. And that's all going to be required for energy transition. So just to leave before passing things on to Liliana, here's some resources that you can leverage in order or to go to get a better understanding of the kinds of skills that might be required by the energy services sector, but also the transition opportunities available. So taking, you know, advantage of the hiring that's happening right now in the sector, but with a view to building a resilient career in the energy sector by understanding how what you might do in the oil and gas industry today and in the short term is going to be of value going forward as our energy system continues to evolve. And on that note, I'm going to pass it on to Liliana, who's going to chat more about building that mental wellness side of things, resiliency and curiosity as you explore, you know, new sectors and potentially career transition.
Thank you so much, Pat. It was very informative. So hi, everyone. And as Pat mentioned, my name is Liliana Gonzalez. I am a registered provisional psychologist. And next slide, please. Thank you. Yes, so I'm a registered provisional psychologist, and I work for Calgary Career Counseling and Synthesis Psychologists. And we are a group of professionals that are dedicated to helping people in being able to plan their careers and being able to make strategic career decisions. We support with everything, including career counseling, all the way to job search support. And for today, what we're going to be talking about includes, we're going to be talking about resiliency. So how to develop resiliency, what it means, how to prepare for different stages of transition. And so if you are considering a career change, as Pat mentioned, it could be a lot of changes involved. And so some tips and strategies to be able to do that, and how to develop a sense of curiosity. So when we think about career success, oftentimes we think about career success sometimes a linear process. And although for some people this might be the case where they progress through their careers, they change careers in an upward manner, this is not always the case. We know that there are times in which you are going to be changing trajectories, you might be trying different things, you might get curious, and develop skill sets in different types of expertise areas. And as we know, there are lots of twists and turns along the path of being able to achieve professional success. Now, when we think about resilience, resilience is the capacity for you to be able to recover from difficulties or challenges. And you can think of this as an ability that you can start developing, that you can foster, and that is going to be very helpful when you are transitioning in any type of career path. So when we think about making any type of career change, there are 4 stages that people usually go through. So these stages are disorientation, emotional response, moving forward, and accepting the new normal. When we're thinking about these stages, and it doesn't mean that we're always going to be going through these stages in a linear manner. Sometimes people might get stuck in one stage or maybe regress. And so it really depends on the experiences you might have. It might depend on your support network and also maybe even your personality. So when we're thinking about things like disorientation, for example, in this stage, people might feel a bit confused. They don't know what to do in terms of career steps. They might be just wondering what they might apply for, or they might just be kind of losing productivity and not feeling like they can make any steps forward. In the emotional response, people usually will have a variety of emotions. So this could include things like fear, anger, excitement, and sometimes the emotions can impact the type of behaviors that you're going to engage in or the types of actions you take towards making a career change. Now, in the moving forward is once you've been able to process some of the emotions, you're ready to start thinking about actions that you can take. So for example, people might start applying for jobs. They might start engaging in training or networking events to be able to start their process of changing careers. And then eventually in the accepting new normal, they might have already made a change, or they are already starting a new position, for example, and they're starting to get used to their new lifestyle. So as Pat mentioned, let's say if you go into the energy services industry, and let's say you have a rotational schedule and you're working 50 days on site and you have 5 days off, you might just be getting used to that new lifestyle and new schedule. So next, I'm going to give you a couple of strategies, or before we get there, I want to assess where you are in terms of the stages of transition. So we're going to launch a poll. And what I want you to think about is thinking on your own experiences, in which stage are you in? And if you are a career professional, career development professional, think about where your clients are typically at in the stages. So I'll give you a few minutes to consider those 4. Excellent. So I'll give you a few more minutes. And something to mention here too is that there's no wrong or right stage that you need to be in. So it's completely normal to be in any part of the stages, and you might also be experiencing a combination of them at the same time. All right, so maybe a few minutes, just maybe 10 seconds or so, we can wrap it up. Thank you. So it seems like the majority of you are in the moving forward stage. You're ready to start taking action. However, we also have a few of you in disorientation, emotional response, and accepting the new normal. So as you can see, each of us are going to be in different stages. And so next, I will be giving you some tips and strategies as to what you can do no matter what stage you're in. So the first tip I'm going to give you in terms of strategies is thinking about disorientation. So if you are in the stage where you're not sure what to do, you're feeling kind of confused and you don't know what steps to take, the first thing to do would be to reach out to your support networks. So here we're thinking about career development professionals, current or previous colleagues, family and friends. And so really going back to that support network can be quite helpful in helping you in this particular stage of transition. Engaging in positive coping mechanisms. So when we think about coping mechanisms that are positive, there are three main things that we typically talk about. So the first one is getting your body moving, exercising. I know it might seem like a common thing to think about, but sometimes when you are thinking about transitioning, you're too caught up thinking about what to do next, and you're not taking too much care of yourself. So it could be as simple as 30-minute exercise daily if you can. Could be going for a walk, doing a bit of cardio, thinking about eating well, so a balanced diet, drinking plenty of water, and then sleeping well at least 7 hours a night. And all of this can get you the energy that you need to start transitioning to the next stage. Now, a few things to also consider would be to think about your current situation and examine it in an objective way. So some of you might have heard of something called the SWOT analysis. For those of you that is new, is a technique that you could use to assess your current circumstances and really think about what could be a good fit in terms of your career change. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So if you grab a piece of paper and you write down this SWOT, what you can start doing is thinking about strengths. So as Pat mentioned, there are different types of skills, knowledge, abilities that employers are going to be looking for. And you can start writing down anything that you consider would be a strength for you to apply to this particular industry. So an example of this, let's say you have significant training in safety and you have a number of certificates in this area. This could be a great thing to write down that could be transferable to this particular industry. Now, in the weakness side, in here, you're going to write anything that could be considered a barrier or that you perhaps would need to work on or improve on to be able to get into this area. So, for example, as you heard earlier, one of the things that employers might need is a Class 1 license or a Class 3 license. And perhaps if you don't have that, it could be a barrier, it could be a weakness. So you could write that down in the weaknesses area. Now, in the opportunities, you can brainstorm any opportunities that are external factors that you could take advantage of. So for example, we know that right now, Canada's energy services sector is experiencing a worker shortage in 2022. So that means that there's going to be more opportunities for you, even if you don't have the exact experience that they're looking for. They will be willing to do training. They might be able to do apprenticeships. So that could be an opportunity. And then lastly, any threats. So anything that you consider that might be, let's say, harming your chances of achieving career success. Now, once you've done some of this, perhaps you are moving towards stage 2 of the career transition. So in this one here, we're starting to have different emotions. And we know emotions are fluid. They change all the time, depending on context. They might change within one day or a week. And so it's important for you to just check in with yourself and identify any of the emotions that you're feeling about transitioning. Now, sometimes people might feel stuck. Some people might feel excited, stressed, confused. But what I would welcome you to do is to think about what are some of the feelings that you're having about transitioning, and also reflect on how these emotions might be influencing your behavior. So something to note here is that it's okay to have any type of emotion, but you could also control how it is going to impact your behavior. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're feeling a little bit fearful about making a transition. For some people, fear may cause a freeze response where they freeze, they don't know what to do, they're not taking action, they're not motivated. Now, for other people, that fearfulness might actually get them motivated to learn as much as they can about that position or the industry to avoid failure. So you could see how the same emotion can have a different impact on your behavior. So by being aware of your emotion, you can think about what to do next. All right, the next stage in the transition, or what I wanted to point out too, is that in terms of emotions, it is going to be very common for you to have some type of fear or worry. And oftentimes this is related to things like fear of failure, maybe the time commitment of looking for a new job, or even training again, and sometimes embarrassment or feeling like other people are going to judge some of your career decisions. And so this is completely normal. Many people experience this. And what could be helpful is to always go back to thinking about what is under your control. So when you think about what you can control how much research you're doing about the industry, who you're connecting with, what type of training you're doing. Those will be the things that will be under your control. Now, in terms of the third stage in the change moving forward, once you're in this stage, you might have processed some of the emotions you're going through. Maybe you're getting a bit more motivation to start acting. And so here, what could be helpful is to shift your mindset from the past and move it towards the future. And it would be helpful to start developing goals that are very specific, measurable, but also realistic. So I'll give you an example. You might have the goal of finding a job within the energy services industry, but this might be a very big goal. It might not be as realistic, or even might be overwhelming to think about, how am I going to achieve this? So breaking it down to things like maybe updating your resume and cover letter, learning more about the different companies, perhaps connecting with 3 professionals in the field, and starting to break down those goals will help you feel like you're getting a sense of achievement and you're moving forward. Try to focus on your strengths as well. And so when you think about the things you've done well, if you've been able to transition in the past to different career paths or jobs, thinking about what worked well for you and what are some of those strengths. So let's say one of your strengths is to network and communicate with people in a variety of fields. That could be something that you can lean on to be able to learn more about. And then always keep your goal in mind, and try to revisit it regularly so that you can assess how you're doing. All right, and then lastly, when you are all ready to accept your new normal, try to focus on what you're grateful for. No matter what position you're going to, there's always going to be things you're going to like and dislike about the position. So really being mindful of anything that you're grateful for and focusing again on the things that you can control. And remember that this journey is going to change all the time, but it's more about being resilient, assessing your situation, and going through the stages every single time. So going back to assessing which stage you're in and using some of the strategies that we've talked about. And then lastly, I wanted to mention curiosity is going to be your friend. So whenever you're starting to consider any type of career changes, try to diversify your connections. Some of you in the chat mentioned that maybe you don't know too many companies or people in the field. There's going to be tons of different events, career fairs, interviews online. There's going to be webinars that you can participate in. So the more you can start attending these types of webinars and participating, the more you'll be able to diversify your network. And as you're going through any of this, ask questions, try to hear people's stories, and just get as curious as you can about the different types of experiences that people are having. All right. I also wanted to let you know there is going to be a webinar that is called Making the Most of Your Connections with Potential Employers. This one is coming up June 15th at noon. And there we'll be talking about specific strategies to network with employers and how to also create a brand. And a few resources here that are hyperlinked. So these cover things including career development, mental health and resiliency. So just know that there's going to be a number of supports available to you. Well, thank you so much. And if you have any other questions or if you need to contact us, here we have our contact information. So I know it's pretty much 1 p.m. So don't know if we have time for questions, but Pat, I'll give the mic to you.
Perfect, thanks. And yes, we are at time and promised that we would wrap up by or at 1 o'clock. So, but do appreciate the questions that you've had, and I've tried to answer some in the chat. We will follow up and include them in our next newsletter. You know, I think just to reiterate what Liliana said, which was so perfect and so related to some of the some of the questions you did have about, making connections with people in the sector. And that's a beautiful way to learn more about the sector, certainly learn, feel that curiosity that you might have about working in this sector. And yes, follow energy services companies on LinkedIn and on Facebook. They tend to use Facebook more often than some other companies. They are sharing about opportunities to connect with them online or in person at job fairs. I did mention the Global Energy Show. It is, you don't have to be purchasing services to go there and connect with people and ask them about their story, their career story, and what got them to working in the energy services sector. Thank you so much for participating. You'll get all this information in our follow-up email, but we invite you to follow us on LinkedIn. Also, don't hesitate to follow us on our personal pages, myself, Pat Huffnell-Smith, or my colleague, Cheryl Knight. And yes, the upcoming event where Liliana will share more information about how to make those most of connections with potential employers. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.